Continuing the case for the opposition, it brings me great pleasure to introduce onto the dispatch box international relations analyst Akhilesh Pillalamarri.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the privilege, and it's a pleasure to speak to you all. I'm glad to see that so many of you all are here. Instead of celebrating the Queen's Jubilee, that might be proof that the Raj is actually gone. As you know, this year, the post-colonial states of the subcontinent are going to be celebrating 75 years of independence. And that's a long time. That's about the lifetime of an individual. Most people alive today in the subcontinent were born after the British left, and not as subjects of the British Crown. The current prime ministers of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh were all born after 1947. Most people who live today in the subcontinent do not remember the British at all. The British Raj is an ever more remote period in the lives of the majority of the people of the subcontinent. This proposition believes the Raj lives on, and English law, language, and English sport do remain deeply embedded in the successive states of the Raj. But the continuing legacy of the Raj is not indicative of a living legacy, any more of the fact that there are so many French words in the English language are indicative of the fact that England is still under a French legacy, that the Norman legacy from 1,000 years ago is still around. The Raj came, ruled, and left, and so have many dozens of empires before them. The British influence is in the process of being assimilated and Indianized so thoroughly that its foreign origins will soon be forgotten, just like that of biryani and tandoori chicken, which come from Central Asia, and shalwar kameez and kurtas, and chilies and tomatoes, which come from the Americas. These are all not from India, yet they're thought of as Indian today. This is not indicative of the fact that India is under the influence of Central Asia or New World in any sense. Today, the frame of reference in modern India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the rest of the subcontinent is characterized by a frame of reference that points towards either the future or a more distant past than the British Raj. This frame of reference is thousands of years old, spanning 4.5 millennia. Today's narratives in India and the rest of the subcontinent are shaped by these countless stories from the past. The fundamental question here is, are India and the other nations of South Asia civil polities that were born in 1947, or are they representative of much older pre-colonial narratives? Winston Churchill once said that India is merely a geographical expression. It is no more a single country than the equator. And this is something that I deny, and that most Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and other people from the subcontinent all deny. Because by this logic, all these countries are merely the product of British conquest, and there's nothing more to them. But that's not true. Indians and South Asians think of themselves in deeper, more ancient terms. Our concept of India predated the British. The Persians called it Hindustan. The Greeks coined the term India. They all had a sense that this subcontinent was this viable geographical entity that was just more than a feature of geography. It was this culture, it was this civilization. Ancient Indian literature itself tells us that India was the country that lies north of the ocean and south of the Snowy Mountains, that is, between the Indian Ocean and the Himalayan mountains. Moving on to Pakistan and Bangladesh, the former sees itself as the heir of the Mughal tradition in India, and the latter sees itself as the nation-state of the Bengali people, a people who have an ethnic history dating back more than a millennia. These are not British constructs. In their symbolism, these post-colonial South Asian states also reach beyond the British period. The national anthem of Pakistan is written in a heavily Persianized form of Urdu, and Persian was the language of the Mughal Empire. India's national motto is in Sanskrit. It comes from the Upanishads, which are a very ancient Hindu scripture. And India's national motto comes from the Pillars of Ashoka, which are 2,200 years old. These are all from before the British came to India. And in Bangladesh, Bangladesh's national story is characterized by the struggle to preserve the Bengali language, an ancient language which is over a millennia year old. Here are a couple of other statistics. 64% of Indians today say that being Hindu is very important to being Indian. And 59% say that speaking Hindi is very important to being Indian. In India, these are very controversial statements to make, but this is how they see themselves. In Pakistan, 84% of people in Pakistan say that they would like to see Sharia, not British law, to be the law of the land. Motion denied. Sorry, denied. And 82% of people in Bangladesh say the same thing. These statistics are not indicative of the grand reality and the fact that these countries do still have penal codes that date from the British period. That is true. The legal systems of these countries all do come from the 19th century British Penal Code. But what remains true is that this is indicative of how people in the subcontinent see themselves, to the lens of their own non-colonial linguistic and religious identities. Politics are said to be downstream of culture, and if this is how people feel, then eventually politics will follow. And they are already following, because today, in these countries, politicians no longer really talk about the British period. They talk about other things. In India, politicians talk about ancient Hindu warrior kings and their struggles against the Mughal Empire. Decades ago, the onus was on renaming British-era cities like Bombay and Calcutta to Mumbai and Kolkata. Today, people no longer do that. They talk about reversing even more ancient harms or perceived harms and reliving ancient struggles in all these countries. This phenomenon is not indicative of just a single party or region in South Asia. It's true of all of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. The most successful political parties in these regions are ones that play to identity, language, caste, religion, and so on. These are the parties that win elections. This is because people in this region see themselves in these terms, not in terms of being citizens of civic states that were created by the British. Let's consider these assertions in a more concrete fashion, be it language, law, or other elements. People in South Asia are seeing themselves in South Asian and subcontinental terms. English is still a language used by the elite. It is still the language of aspiration. But today, more people in India use the internet in Indian languages than they do in English. Over 500 million Indians now use the internet in an Indian language, which is more than the number of Indians online in English. In the realm of politics, while India, Pakistan, and its neighbors are Westminster-style parliamentary democracies, the leaders act not like prime ministers of a British system with the collective leadership. They act like rajas. They act like fountains of justice who take care of their people. This is very much in the tradition of the rajas and sultans that used to dominate the subcontinent thousands of years ago. Geopolitically, the subcontinent has moved on beyond Western norms as well. Pakistan is close with China. India is close with Russia. These non-Western countries, India does not follow the British or Western template in terms of how it structures its geopolitics. Finally, let's consider the realm of law. The legal systems of the subcontinent are derived from the British Penal Code, true. But the norms of the people of India are slowly coming up and influencing how these laws are actually implemented. Indians tend to take questions of personal honor, defamation, and so on very, very strongly. And that's why, even though these laws were structured in a way to be followed in a liberal Western sense, today Indians sue each other for defamation, insults to religion, insults to honor, and other such things that are indicative of how they feel about their culture, language, gods, and so on. This is indicative of a moral, normative way of thinking that is beyond the British way of thinking, that is beyond the Western way of thinking. Village elders still decide many areas of life outside the formal legal system, and people still follow traditions instead of the British-era penal system in terms of how they structure their lives and how they structure the law. Therefore, I say to you, the British Raj does not live on. the British Raj was merely a brief period of time that came and went, like many other empires came and went in the subcontinent. It has come and gone, and it was merely a straitjacket that attempted to fit a much older civilization into it. And this much older civilization is now reasserting itself. Its norms, its traditions, language, religion, and every other element of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the rest of the subcontinent, they are now coming back to the fore. They are now re-emerging from a long period of being shadowed, of being straitjacketed, and from now on, these new narratives will take hold and they will continue to drive the history and the story and the future of the Indian subcontinent. So I urge you to vote against this motion. Thank you.